won't you come over here? I need to ask you something quickly, my dear. Why do you always settle for something less? You know that, baby, you deserving the best. Yeah, yeah. Go take a look up in the mirror. You gotta see a little clearer. Who's that woman looking right back? And she's a beauty queen, bad, bad. You ain't nobody's number two. These men, they should be fighting over you. No second guessing what I'm saying. Baby, you can take this to the bank and make it sweet. It's time to listen to yourself right now. Make it sweet. Don't even listen to these guys right now. Make it sweet. Let's treasure baby deep inside right now. Make it sweet. So go and see what you can find right now. Don't you know you're not just some other girl? There's no one like you anywhere in the world. You have a strength like nothing I've ever seen. You're like a woman ripped right out of my dreams. Yeah, yeah. Go take a look up in the mirror. You gotta see a little clearer. Who's that woman looking right back? And she's a beauty queen, bad, bad. You ain't nobody's number two. These men, they should be fighting over you. No second guessing what I'm saying. Baby, you can take this to the bank and make it sweet. It's time to listen to yourself right now. Make it sweet. Don't even listen to these guys right now. Make it sweet. Let's treasure baby deep inside right now. Make it sweet. So go and see what you can find right now. It's time to make a switch. Just open your eyes. Ooh. You're perfect just like this. I'm telling no lies.
Whenever you transact business with these aliens, always write UCC 1-207, 1-103 without prejudice. So you never sign, and what we were talking about earlier, nothing. You don't sign anything with them without preserving your rights. All right, let me back up on this. I assume that that's the Internal Revenue Service?
Yes, sir.
All right, so what you want to do, you want to write down written nature of discovery. And first, a writ in the nature of discovery. All right? And you will list some of these things that you want to ask those foreigners. You want to ask one, send you the document, certified document, of the delegation of authority order issued to them from the Congress of the United States Republic, North America. And you're looking forward to that. You're going to ask, next one, relative to whoever's signature is on that instrument that they sent to you, proof of that person's nationality, proof of their political allegiance, and of course a DOAO, delegation of authority order. Ask why they sent in the mail this instrument commanding of you money when you have no money. No, when you have no money. And ask them, is their organization foreign or domestic? And ask them to send a copy of the branch of government that issued authority to them and the reference number for the certificate confirmation.
You just go right back to, are you foreign or domestic?
Yes. Is your corporation foreign or domestic? Then ask where their registration number can be verified, i.e. their articles of incorporation. You also ask, at what juncture did the Constitution establish them? This is back to DOAO, you're being more specific. And this is actually redundant, but these are different questions of really the same thing. Where did the Constitution establish their branch of government? As you didn't notice it, but you need clarification. I didn't ask you that. It was what you asking them. This is going to be written, right? And you're going to ask them, what is lawful money? That's a question by itself. Then you're going to give them so many days to respond. How many days would you think would be nice? 30 days? Yes. 10? 10 is nice. That's what they usually do, right? It's fine.
All of these buildings all around here, as I told in class last night, they're ours. They belong to us. They're ancient, these buildings. There's a whole city underneath this city. They went and burned all the major cities, the major energy centers. Our ancestors set up these energy centers that we call Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Atlanta, Detroit, right? Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles. They are energy centers. They're not where they are in huge, large cities just because of some coincidence. There's energy and power in these places. London, Rio de Janeiro.
Maleficent, they called her race of people the Moors, and the Moors are, and I just saw it again. I was just like, yo, if you erase our history, like most black people, we don't know where we come. We think we came from slaves. We don't know our bloodline.
The two civilizations, or the two cultures that are most often obfuscated, obscured, corrupted by Western academics are Egypt and the Moors, for essentially the same reason. White, quote-unquote, supremacist views said we can't allow these people who we know are distinctly African, that we would misname black or Negro, we can't recognize that these are the people that were our tutors.
I am a king. There it is right there. I've been right all along. See, that's the crown, and right there, that's Ethiopia. That's where my family came from. And right here, see, that's the black and white hand intermingled. Whatever that means. And then here's a shield showing that we were great warriors.
With a Jewish star on it.
Yeah. I wonder what that means.
That means, Fred Sanford, if I know my Bible, and I know my Bible, you are a descendant of a king of the Jews. And if you're a king, you're also Jewish.
There's them right there. That's why you find all over Europe, you'll find these statues of these people, because that was them, that was us. That actually, these were our ancestors. They moved. It's not they moved. They actually tricked, and they literally tricked us and keep us in captivity in Europe for 200 years. Let me say this again. Our people, the story that you heard, that our people have been in Europe for about 2,000, for like, oh, we've been in slavery for 200 to 300 years. They were not talking about here in America. They were talking about our indigenous ancestors that got trapped in Europe and Africa for nearly 200 and 200 plus years over there. So they got us in captivity, not in slavery. They just literally block us from coming back home because they know we were the one that built stuff. So they want our geniuses. They want our architectures, our ways of medicine, including food, okay? Now, these are the same people. Now, this is not the first time. They didn't know about our people just out of nowhere. They know we were known for that. They have this knowledge since ancient Kemet, okay? And the ancient Kemet, they used to call us what? Nubia. Okay? From Nu to Moon, for Nubia, Moon. That's where it go. These are the same people. This is the ancient Egypt. This is the same groups of people from the ancient time that known to have a reputation of master builders. They know them in Egypt as Nubians. Okay? And further down the line, because all of this was like, what, thousands upon thousands of years at that time, then furthermore up that timeline they know them as the Mu people. Okay? Nubian Mu. So that's why you get the connotation of Mu and Nu from that. These are the same people that they have historical records knowing they were known as master teachers, master builders, and master architectures and master agriculturers. These were the people, okay? They called them Nubian at that time in ancient Egypt, okay? They were the one that went to Egypt and built Egypt. So let me just stay on this for a quick second before I move forward to show you. So when you talk about the Nubian, these are the Nubian. There's them right there, okay? They all got what? The feathers, okay? The same thing you see our ancient indigenous people still have the same hairstyle, which what you call the lock. So this is the early state of the lock. Before the lock grow longer, this is what it was. And they got a feather on top of their head. There's them right.
That the Moors were the custodians of ancient Kemetic wisdom and culture. This is the priesthood who migrated into North Africa after the fall of Kemet to the Ptolemies and things of that nature, and West Africa and things of that nature. So out of West Africa you have the Dogons and things of that nature, the great Mali tribe, the Mali kingdoms and empires, the Songhay. So you're talking about people who introduced into Europe during their dark ages, you know, by building their kingdoms, like not like they introduced it to them like they were trying. No, wherever we go, we regentrify. Wherever we go, we shine our light. So what we did is introduce alchemy, we introduced architecture, sacred geometry. By helping ourselves, we were able to help everybody around us.
We have to understand the role of the Moors. Our children have to understand the role that the Moors played in history, who they were. Because my problem is not so much what they say about the Moors. My problem is the fact that they're confusing the issue. What they've done is this, very skillful. They took the word Moor and they mix it up with the word Muslim. They take the word Muslim and mix it up with the word Arab. And then pretty soon they start talking about Moorish Arabs. The word Moor means black. The word Moor is a medieval term that became Negro after the enslavement of the Moors. Before they were called the Moors, they were called Ethiopians, which means dark-faced. Ethiopia was the land of the burnt face. Ethiopians were the people from the land of the burnt face. Moor does not mean Muslim. There were Moors who were Kemites or followed the Kemetic legacy. It is important that, yes, a very important facet of the Moors that went into Europe post 710 AD happened to practice the Islamic faith. But not all Moors are Muslims. You could be a Moor and not have any faith system that you followed particularly at all. And once we get to that, then we can understand that it was we the Moors, the Africans. See, the Moors were the libraries, were the collected libraries of all ancient wisdom up until that point. And the Moors of their time took this information and took it to a higher level. To think that Africans brought into Europe sidewalks, streets lit by lamps for miles that you could walk. To think that the Moors were able to control the flow of water so that water could flow into your home where you could get both hot and cold water. That they could build according to the wind systems so that you had air conditioning in the warmer weather and heat in the cooler weather. This is what the Moors brought in. The Moors brought in strawberries and lemons. They brought in different ways of eating. They brought in the idea of eating in courses. They started the first musical conservatory in Europe. The first musical school was created by Moors. And they started the universities that we today call Oxford and Cambridge. Some of these people from Oxford and Cambridge became so smart they came to these new colonies and they started a college that's called King's College in New York City.
The king of the Moors submits to the Antichrist. This is a 15th century manuscript from Bavaria, Germany about the Antichrist. Essentially, the narrative in this manuscript is against Islam. However, the representation of the Moors in this manuscript is important. The Moors are shown wearing a regional costume known as the Jalaba. This is one of the oldest depictions of the Jalaba in history. On a different page, the headless men are shown marching with the Moors. The headless men of olden days are the apes of our modern era. On this page in particular, it shows the envoys of the Antichrist preaching before the kings of Libya and Ethiopia. Notice that there is no distinction between the king of the Moors and the king of Ethiopia. However, there is a distinction between the king of the Moors and the king of the Libyans. The Libyans here represent the indigenous North Africans. The king of the Moors submits. Did the Moors rule Europe for 700 years? The history of the Moors has been distorted by both racism and embellishment. Many who believe that the Moors were black repeat phrases such as, "The Moors ruled Europe for 700 years." Not knowing that the idea of the Moors ruling Spain for 700 years is based on the Moors not being black. And because of the embellishment by Hoteps, the domination of Spain became the whole of Europe. If people are going to claim that black people ruled Spain for 700 years, they should provide a consecutive list of black rulers for those years. I don't doubt that there were black governors of provinces and castles. My doubt is that they ruled these provinces and castles for 700 years. People need to understand the different dynasties that ruled and the civil wars that occurred over that 700-year period. Towards the latter end of the 700 period, the Moors were mostly that black contingent in the enemy's army. Did the Moors rule Europe for
When the Moors came into Europe, the first slavery was white slavery, traded in their own people for hundreds of years. White folks sold their people to the Moors the moment they saw Moors coming. It was of great pride to be able to have a black face on your family shield. It was an honor for you to have a name like Moore or Morrison. Yes, white slavery was it. Selling particularly their daughters. They would sell them all over the world. And you know, in many families, the wives and the children reportedly were so relieved when they were sold. They were better treated by Moors as servants than they were as wives to their European husbands. See, we don't know this because they are so focused on us in the newspaper nowadays. It seems like we are the ones that are so perverse and depraved.
The Moors were black people that dominated the European, the Iberia, Spain and Portugal, and called it Al-Andalus or Andalusia, from 711 to 1492. And over a period of 800 years, they finally conquered the black people in Spain, enslaved them. A lot of the first slaves to come to the Western Hemisphere did not come from Africa. There were black people enslaved in Spain and brought over here. The books of the Moors were burnt. It is said the Moors had everything it took to make a civilization great. And now nobody knows anything about it. Are white people inherently evil? I do not believe people are born with a racist nature. No more than I believe black people are born crackheads, are born violent, are born criminals. That is learned behavior. Nevertheless, I would have to say that Europeans are the product of a perverse and a sick culture.
We can more honestly inquire into the nature of Moorish iconography, shedding the presumptions of our modern ideologically racialized era in favor of the context of the time period in which these artworks were formed. With reference to some historical theories which attempt to justify Moorish iconography in European coats of arms as placed there by white families to symbolize those Moors that they vanquished during the Reconquista against the Moors in Europe. A theory proposed by the likes of William Cecil Wade in his Symbolisms of Heraldry, published in 1898, page 144. A Reconquista which we should also recognize was more likely declared on the basis of religion than of ethnic identity. However, Wade's theory falls short on a number of fronts, one of which stems from what one might term common sense. Whilst the ideological framework of today and the Middle Ages might differ to certain degrees, it still doesn't make much logical sense for members of white European families to use up space on their coats of arms in order to present their sworn enemies, often in positive, verging on majestic light. We know that of the 5 major components of a coat of arms, the shield, the crest, the helmet, the wreath and the mantle, it is the shield and the crest that provide the greatest freedom for specialized representations. The wreath and the mantle only ever exhibiting the colors adopted by the family, and the style of the helmet a symbol of the bearer's rank. Does it really make much sense to waste one's crest in glorifying their sworn nemesis? And the Moorish connection isn't limited to crests alone, but also to the shield. We often observe Moorish crests sporting the very family's colours and charges as adorned on the shield, and sometimes explicitly emblazoning the Moorish iconography itself. To observe this in light of Wade's theory might beg one to view it as a nonsensical kind of self-imposed Moorish colonialism of European heraldry, claiming in death the families of the white Europeans that supposedly killed them, a reconquista from the grave. We must conjointly acknowledge the code of chivalry that all knights were sworn to, even if they didn't always abide by it. An honour code similar to that of the samurai code of Bushido, encompassing a spectrum of virtues, including that which called for women to be protected and cherished. Moorish women that we also find adorning family crests. Does it then abide by the code of chivalry for those bearing the coats of arms in question to essentially brag about their slaying of Moorish women? Would that have been particularly brave? Bravery being another fundamental tenet of the chivalric code. We might also reject this theory on the grounds that in so many of the Moorish depictions, the Moors aren't dressed like Moorish Muslims at all, adorning European Christian regalia. Christian Bibles, crucifix and liturgical headdress and scepters, in stark contrast to the turbans and flowing robes we so often and expectantly observe in Moorish portraiture and read about in writings describing them. As can be observed in the 16th century Chavaris del Rey, an oil painting of the King's Fountain in Lisbon by an anonymous Flemish painter. Of the abundance of swarthy people inhabiting the painting, we might scope out the horse-borne man within the foreground, a swarthy knight adorning the emblem of the Order of Santiago. The Order of Santiago being the most prestigious order within Iberian society at the time, and to which the requirements for membership demanded the member and their entire lineage be Christian, have the capability of financially maintaining themselves without public funds, to be literate, a sponsor of the arts, and for none of their lineage to be deemed inferior or of an enslaved nature. And so what then? Do we conclude that these are Christianized Moors, baptized into the faith and converted into a European Christian identity, much like the Vikings underwent during their conquest of Central Europe? But then this returns us to Wade's original theory, and begging the question, why would the Christian religious crusades have had to kill these fellow Christians in the first place? In a final criticism of this theory, we conclusively reference the fact that not only do these European families adorn Moorish iconography in their coat of arms, but also in family name. J.A. Rogers, in his Nature Knows No Colour line, highlights this point in rejection of such prevailing theories. Who were these blacks? Wade, Grand Maison, and some others say that they represent Moors whom the Crusades fought in Spain and Palestine. Some, as Goff says, represent trade and exploration, that is, of whites who had ventured into black men's lands. For instance, Sir John Hawkins, father of the English slave trade, had a bound Negro in his coat of arms. Both of these views are right only in a very small way, because they do not explain why so many of these families with Negroes are named Moor, Blackamoor, and the like. McRitchie is correct when he says that families with the name Moor had Moors as their ancestors. He adds, nor can the Moors of heraldry be explained sufficiently on the theory that the founders of the families bearing Moors as supporters and Moors' heads as crests had won their spurs in assisting the Spaniards to expel the Moors. The bearing among ancient coat of arms is too common to admit this explanation. A frequency of depictions that Rogers, prior to this explanation, presented in reference to Moorish iconography in European coats of arms, stating that the latter appear by the thousands in heraldry. I counted 497 families in Rietstap's Armorial General that had one or more Negroes in their coats of arms. Some had as many as 6. Seebamtcher's Wappen Book of 88 volumes had even more. Besides, Rietstap gives few extinct families, some of whose descendants are no doubt now living. His works too deal principally with the continent, so not many British families were named. Later, with only a little research, I found 162 of the latter with one or more Negroes. With that in mind, it's safe to say that the conjecture of the Crusades, among other theories, are equally suffering from presentism and this generalization of lazy scholarship, representative of the colonial and post-colonial time periods out of which these theories are arising. We can more
Now, let's return to the heraldic crests. There's a lot going on here on this slide. So in Germany, we see a foundational black German on a shield or a blazon with the dominant X that he stands upon. Now, what's very interesting about that particular crest, you see his eye, he's looking sideways. You see, you have to read everything. Everything is a sign and a symbol. He's looking sideways quite smugly, as much to say, yeah, I know, I have it all. I'm sitting on this knowledge. And that's in Germany around the 14th century. But then we find the French crests with the dominant X or Sienta. Now this is Gabriel. So we're putting all together this information, and we have Gabriel Goulet, and that's his crest. And he has the dominant X, but he also has the crescent moon symbol, which is attributed to the Moorish origin. But if we look here as well under the actual shield, you can see the derivatives of Goulet, or Gouli and Goul, and they move into Britain, those particular surnames. And so the crescent, then I found René Morel, which was another shield with the original French foundational people with the crescent moon on top in a triplicate fashion. And below the shield is the quartering around the fifth cosmology, or the checkerboard pattern. So by moving through, you start to use all of the signs and symbols, and you start to read them and tie them back into the global cultural continuities of foundational blacks of Europe. And so the next slide, by following the crescent moon, is very, very interesting. This is where you see all of the cultural continuities. Now that head over to the left, my left, is a Moor's head, and it's from Germany, and it's a marriage cup. But the image below, they very rarely show you underneath, and it is an outstretched eagle with 3 crescent moon symbols. So you can see how they were using all of their signs and symbols into their crests. And so we find Michael Collet of France with the quartering around the 5th in the crescent moons. We find Jacob Voulmont with the outstretched eagle. And then we find the same signs and symbols in the Scottish crest over to my right, which is the Parkin Moor of Scotland. And so you can see all of these cultural continuities playing out from their cultural traditions. This is the movement of memory.
Love this.
This is cultural meaning making in its continuity and in its form. And they're showing you that they revere the animal domain and nature and the cosmos. There's a lot going on that particular slide, and it's very important. We probably need to go back and look at this again because there's a lot of information. It's interesting, that particular cup, the marriage cup, the Moor, it's now been valued at $2 million or $2.5. And where does that money, you say? You know, this is our history, and it's in the hands of later Europeans. But we're reclaiming it. We're reclaiming it. Next slide, please. And so as we move into those heraldic signs and symbols, let's go back to the X. The X, which is scienta, knowledge, that we found in the Druids and the Chaldees, is here on the crest of Francois Prévost of Bonnezu. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that, this French. I hope I'm not killing you. The surname has its roots in the variations of officials in positions of responsibility from the Latin to place in charge. So Prévost would become provost, which is used to denote the head of certain universities such as Oxford or Cambridge. And it's a foundational Black French origin. And during the 14th century, the fief or lordship of Bonnezu belonged to the noble Prévost family. It is now in the hands of later Europeans who produce wine from the vineyards. So you can see, can't you, by following the signs and symbols and moving into her heraldic crests and shields, that they are retaining their identity. We can trace these surnames back to the original people. They no longer, but they no longer have that estate. Next slide, please. So heraldry is another form of African expression. The founding principle of heraldry is the feminine essence as an African concept. She was the ultimate decision maker, and through Hera, you see the prefix, Hera, according to ancient law, she chose kings as sovereign rulers. This cultural and global veneration of the Great Mother provides another important insight into the ways of being for the world's first populations. You see the Igbo woman, she carries the central quartering geometry of medieval heraldry on her torso as a tattoo. This ancient form of cultural meaning making is thousands of years old and can be found on a similar stone carving of quartering from South Africa in Michael Tellinger's book, more than 100,000 years old. Now, the prefix Hera, who was the great goddess of early Aegean civilization, Hera's name could also be a cognate of Hera, the Holy One, a title of ancient goddess queens who ruled in her name. Homer refused to mention Hera in the Iliad because she was so great as to outshine Homer's heroine Helen. In Babylon, she was Era, the queen who controls birth. She chose kings and gave them sovereignty by marrying them and deposing them. You see, this is African. They retained their African traditions. They moved through into Europe and continued those cultural traditions through heraldic expressions. The quartering, the stars on the Igbo woman serve both as aesthetic elements along with the body as a metaphor, as a doorway to the universe. You see, the body was always radiating with the signs and messages. Next slide, please. Now, let's return to the heraldic crests. There's a lot going on here on this.